Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to show you a positional game played between Gary Kasparov and Ivanchuk. Okay, this was played in the year 1988 Moscow Russian Championship. Okay, here Kasparov played c4, knight f6, knight c3, e5. This is a standard English opening where white will be opening mostly on the queen side, where black counters in the center and part of king side. Okay, knight f3, knight c6, g3. This variation, the bishop will naturally go to g2. Why? Because there is no much scope on c4 or any other diagonal in this. So bishop b4 and bishop g2, castles, and e4. Okay, after e4, white don't have much options than to attack this e4 pawn, and in this position the main idea of black is to shut down this bishop and gain a advantage on the center by playing rook e1 and later d6. So here he played knight g5, and now this pawn is under attack, so need to protect this. So bishop into c3. Okay, we'll start analyze from this position. Now we have only two options. One is to take with d into c3 or b into c3. For example, if he takes with d into c3 and opens up this bishop, then the problem is this e4 pawn will be very strong after rook e8, and although this bishop is open, but he'll have a bad bishop in this diagonal, so we cannot challenge it by f3. For example, we cannot challenge it by f3. Why? Because he will leave this pawn and makes this two white pawns as a double isolated pawns in the center, which will be a much weakness, and this pawn will be also a double pawn. So for example, after b into c3, for example, white took b into c3 and rook e8. Now we need to challenge this pawn on e4 to open this diagonal, or even a knight can sit on to f3. Knight h3 is little slow. Why? Because after f4 there is no good square for knight, so he needs the knight to come at least to e4 or f3. So for example, if he wants to play d3 and challenge this pawn on e4, it will be a great mistake. Why? Because he still opens the white bishop, but black will not allow this, since these two pawns will be hanging and isolated. So he wants to open up the f file. And keep this bishop active, and maybe attacking on the f file, so that after d3 or d4 these two pawns of c4 and c3 will not be much weakened. So he played f3, here ef3 and knight f3. Now he played d5. Okay, after d5, white cannot take cd5, because after knight d5 all these pawns will be very weak. It will be backward pawns, and black will have a free play by bishop f5, and almost all pieces will be developed easily. and there is no d4 in future. Why? Because c3 will be hanging and knight e3 will be a big advantage for black. So now he played d4 to open up this diagonal and later to gain some control in the center. So knight e4. Now I think he can play queen c2, queen d3, supporting this pawn. So for example, if he plays queen d3, c d4, q d4, and bishop e6 and bishop d5, that position is good for both the sides. Even white have double bishop advantage, but still black can hold on with knight a4, knight c5, knight c4, sorry. So he played queen c2, leaving the c4 pawn, and d into c4. Now he plays rook b1, holding this bishop down to c8. So he played f5, and I think Kasparov played a good move, an interesting move called g4. This move I think is a good move from my point. Why? Because if f into g4, for example, knight e5 opens all the diagonals of bishop, queen, and open file of rook. After knight into e5, bishop into e4, I think this position is very good for white, because the two bishops are very active, and this rook file, f file, is very dangerous, and this bishop is very slow. This knight is under attack, and immediately h7 is under attack. This is very good compensation for white. So he played queen e7. After g4 he played queen e7. Now g into f5. And d6. Now I think again he played one more good move with knight g5. Now he's threatening bishop d5, followed by f6, maybe knight f7 at one point. After queen e2, bishop d5 will be a great threat. So he played queen e2 and bishop d5 check. King h8 is the only move. Why? Because if we king f8, knight h7 and queen e2, f6 will be very bad for black. So queen e2, rook e2, and bishop f4, threatening knight f7 after bishop d6. Knight f7 wins the pawns on d6 and c4. So knight d8 is preventing knight f7, and bishop g6, cd6, and rook b e1. Another good move which finished the game after rook e8. So he took rook e1, rook e1, and bishop d7, preventing rook e8 with the idea of knight c6, maybe, or even h6. So he played rook e7 with the idea of f6, and rook h7 will be a checkmate. So here he played bishop c6, threatening this d5, and Kasparov played f6, and Ivanchuk resigned this game. In view of after bishop d5, rook e8, bishop g8, f7, knight f7, knight f7 is a checkmate. So this is a good game, good example of how to play an English opening. Simple. Okay. I hope you enjoy this game. See you in the next class.